Hey everybody, I am back with part 3 of the mods that I've done to my Ranger Raptor. So in the first one I covered everything on the interior. On the second one I covered everything on the exterior, minus the new lights that I put on here. So these are a brand called Max Speeding Rods. I haven't hooked them up electrically yet, but I did put them up on the rack. I'm going to be running a second battery into the bed of the truck, and that's what I'm going to hook these up to because they actually draw a little more current than my pod lights up here or some of the other ones. I can't do it off of a single switch. So today's video is going to be all of the performance mods and mechanical mods I've done to my truck. So I'm actually going to pop the hood and show you some stuff. But I want to start off with the Ford Performance Tune. It's not the first thing I did, but it is the biggest difference of all the things I've done to my truck. It's incredible. So you probably already know about it. It adds 50 horsepower, so it takes you from 405 to 455 horsepower. But to me, the bigger number is going from 430 foot-pounds of torque to 536 foot-pounds of torque. So more than 100 foot-pounds of torque. That's huge in this truck. Horsepower is great for top-end, high speed. Torque is for that acceleration, and when you're out on the trails, it makes a big difference. So I absolutely love it. You can 100% tell the difference between a tuned and a non-tuned vehicle just driving them. If you're on the fence about it, I would say go with it only because it does come with a warranty through Ford Performance. It doesn't replace your existing warranty. It covers things that might be damaged due to the tune. It covers you for 3 years, 36,000 miles from the date your vehicle was built. So if you buy it used after a year and you put the tune on it, you only have 2 more years and then up to a total of 36,000 miles on the vehicle. But if another thing breaks, like if a charge pipe comes off of your intercooler or your radiator hose pops off and it's not caused by the tune itself, you're covered under your standard warranty, your 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty. So you'll hear a lot of different stuff, and it is dealer dependent. Some dealers might cover more than others, but just know anytime you tune a vehicle, there's a little bit of risk. But to me, 100% worth it. I've had a lot of vehicles, a lot of turbocharged vehicles. This is the first one I've ever tuned because I've always been hesitant in the past, and I'm so glad I did it. And I would say another really big thing about it is it tunes the transmission, and it shifts so much better with the Ford Performance Tune than it did stock. I was getting a fair amount of hard shifts into second gear. Sometimes downshifting was really hard. After I got the tune, all of that went away, and it's so much better. So anyway, getting it installed, you can do it yourself. I've heard some people say you're still covered under the warranty. The specific rules through Ford Performance are, if you have it installed at a dealer or an ACE certified mechanic, you are good for the warranty. Other people say it's a part sold by Ford, so they would have to fight me on it. I'm not willing to take that risk. I had it done at a dealership. I did have to go to 3 different dealerships before I found one that would do it. And it's going to cost you anywhere from like $100 to $300 or $400 just to get it installed. It's not a standard cost that they look up in a book. They do it based on what they think it's going to take. I think a reasonable amount is like $180 to $200. You might find it for less depending where you are. You might have to pay more. So that's it on the tune. So I bought this truck back in March of 2024. It was one of the first ones out here. They didn't have a whole lot of parts for the Ranger Raptor or the new Gen 6 Ranger in general here in the States, and I really wanted some ditch lights. There's a company in Australia that made a ditch light and hood strut combo, all one mount. So I went ahead and got that. Turns out that the hood struts work great for them because they have a steel hood. It's a lot stronger. Ours is an aluminum hood. I didn't know that until I tried to stick a magnet to it and realized it. But having a hood strut connect right here with no bracket that goes further up puts a ton of stress right here on the hood. And it connects down to a point right down here. So it's only about like a 10-inch strut with a ton of pressure. And when you pull down on the front, it was almost bending the entire hood. So I ended up disconnecting them. There are a lot of companies nowadays in the States. I think Redline's one of them. There's a bunch, but they have a bigger bracket that goes all the way up to here, and they actually hook from the back to the front. So when you pull down, you're actually putting more torque towards the compression side of it, as opposed to 90 degrees off and putting a ton of torque on the hood. So just be aware when you do look for hood struts that you get one that kind of goes from the back to the front. They do a good job. My concern also was when it was really windy, the hood struts were putting a lot of stress, again, right here, whereas this thing has a hold up and down. It doesn't get super windy here in Virginia, but sometimes it's good to just have that security. Anyway, that's it for the hood struts. or sorry, the ditch mounts and the hood struts. Okay, so while we're up here in the engine bay, I want to go over two of the other things, my S&B intake and my oil catch can. So I'm going to start with the oil catch can, and I want to show you guys what your vehicle comes with. So this tube that I'm going to show you right here basically connects, this is your passenger side valve cover, and then your driver's side valve cover has one as well. But basically, this thing was hooked onto the valve cover and went right back into the intake right here, right as it goes into the engine. So what it's doing is positive crankcase ventilation. That's what this thing is. It takes all of the blow-by, anything that, spiders, anything that goes down into the actual crank comes back up through the oil galleries and puts a little bit of positive pressure in your valve head covers. Part of that is just air, part of it is uncombusted fuel, but another part of that is a little bit of oil vapor. So that comes in, and then you're putting that oil vapor right back into your intake, and that can gum up your valves a little bit, and then you're just burning some oil. So what this is now replaced with an oil catch can. So right now I have a tube coming off the passenger side valve cover, so that positive pressure that was going into the intake is now going to an oil air separator, which is about the size of a soda can. It's hooked up over behind the battery. It has an oil air separator, and then just the air, and then maybe some of the uncombusted fuel, but probably not any of that, because a lot of times it smells a little bit like gas in there as well. But that comes back in, and then just the air goes back into the intake here and then gets burned up. You also have a PCV on the driver's side, but it takes a little bit more to hook it up. You can get a dual valve. I just went with the single valve because my truck isn't super modified. If you're going to be pushing a ton more boost, bigger turbos, things like that, maybe consider the dual valve. I thought about switching up to it, but I'm just sticking with what I've got for now. It has been doing a really good job, and I'll actually show you, it's been about 5,000 miles since the last oil change. So what I'll do is I'll take this off and show you how much oil it actually catches. All right, so I'm not sure, I think you can see that. There's a fair amount of oil in there, and honestly, it just smells like oil. I don't smell any fuel or anything in there, but that's all oil that would have gone right back into the intake. So it's always good to get that, you know, separated out where you can. The other thing of this is on the driver's side, that goes back into the intake upstream of a turbo. So now it's going to be going through a turbo, through the intercooler, a lot of low places for it to settle, and then back up to the intake. And by ventilating one side, you're actually getting a fair amount of all of it. You're reducing the pressure in general and sending a lot more of it through there. So not all of this would have gone directly into the intake. Some of it is kind of brought over from the driver's side as well. So just know, single valve is good enough for just a stock or maybe the Ford Performance tune. If you're going to be doing a lot more than that, consider the dual valve. Okay, it's all back on there. It's that easy. I'm not actually emptying it right now. I empty it every time I change the oil, and right now I've got about 500 more miles until my next oil change. At that point, I will actually dump this in with all the other old oil, put it right back on there, but it is only about that full at the bottom. It could hold a whole lot more. So you could probably go 2 or 3 oil changes, but it's always good to keep an eye on how much is in there. And the tubes are super easy to move on and off. You just press the button. There we go. So you press on this side, slides right off. Super easy, quick connect. Boom. So there you go. UPR single valve oil catch can on a Ranger Raptor. You could go ahead and get the dual valve as well, and it does both the driver's side and the passenger side. I think if I was doing it over again, knowing what I want to do this truck in the long run, I probably would have gone dual valve, but I only have the single valve for now, and honestly, until I actually put bigger turbos and stuff like that, I don't need the dual valve. So this will be good for probably another 3 or 4 years until I really start modding the truck a lot more. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is the S&B cold air intake. Basically, when you buy your truck, it has a big rectangular intake here. The input here is a little bit smaller, but in the same location. And then you've got some tubes. I'm actually going to grab the old one and show you this. So here is the original intake right here. I guess it does have about the same size input here, but this bends 90 degrees, comes around, goes through a relatively decent size filter, and I'll show you that too. That's the stock filter. It's pretty big. It's a good paper filter, and I just got a Ford Motor Company. I did replace it before I put this new cold air intake on there. But then The big difference in this one is it goes from these 90-degree bends here with all this flexible, you know, really smaller tubing with, you know, more restriction to it, to a much larger plastic, smooth all the way across, and smoother bends and everything. And it also has a way bigger filter up here. Another thing it has is a door or a little flap you can take off on this side to let even more air in there, but then you're pulling hot air from the engine compartment, so I don't have that open on mine. So for me, I went with the dry filter in here, but I think when I get my replacements, I'm gonna get the oil filter, and I'm actually gonna order 2 of them. And the reason I'm gonna order 2 is so that I can always have one oiled and ready. So basically, when you take an oil filter out, you gotta rinse it with water, you gotta clean it all out, and then you've gotta oil it. But before you can oil it, you have to let it dry for 24 hours. So if you have 2 of them to rotate through, you can have one that's always ready. Every time you change the oil, you could change it, or every 2 times. They're probably good for 10, 20,000 miles. But you know, if you have 2, you can rotate through as often as you want. In the past, there was concern about if you put way too much oil, you could actually, you know, mess up the mass air sensor, which used to be like right off the intake. You'd have a mass air sensor. I don't know where it is on here. Somehow it calculates it differently. I don't even know if we have a mass air sensor in this, or if computers just do all that work with maybe some impeller along the way or something. But from what I understand, that is no longer a concern. Now, if you were to like dunk your filter in oil, yes, it's going to gum up your turbos, it's going to have some problems, but the aerosol oil is really easy. If you just do the oil the right way and don't go crazy overboard, you'll be totally fine. So like I said, I have the dry filter in here, but I'm going to be switching to the oil filter. Overall, I notice a little bit more turbo noise or induction noise, not a significant amount, and maybe a little more throttle response. No more power, but I haven't really done any dynos with my truck, and seat of the pants, I wouldn't be able to tell, you know, 5 or 7 more horsepower, but I do like the way it looks, and it does sound better, and it fits really, really well. When I installed it, I did have a rattle, and it turns out that the bracket that holds the intake on there was loose, even with the stock one, but the stock one has so much rubber around it, it wasn't actually translating that over to the bracket and going up the frame rail. When I put this on there, it was rattling, but I ended up figuring out what it was, so it's all taken care of now. But overall, there are a lot of companies out there that make intakes for the Ranger Raptor. I think the coolest looking and one of the best designed is Indy Carbon, and it's all fully carbon fiber. It looks phenomenal. It has 2 separate filters, one for each turbo, which is also really cool. It's a little bit expensive, but I think for what you're getting, it's really worth it. This, and that one's about $1,000. This, on the other hand, is a really well designed. It's just made of plastic, but it does a really good job. It was only 350 bucks. So for me, I was willing to take a little bit of sacrifice in looks. It still looks cool, but not as good as the Indy Carbon. And I saved about 650 bucks. So, you know, do with it what you will. Carbon fiber in the engine bay does look awesome. I really like it, but to each their own. I just couldn't, you know, swallow that price tag. The next 2 things I want to show you are underneath the vehicle. One you probably won't be able to see, but I'm going to see if I can make it visible. And the other is the drive shaft. So let's just get under there and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're underneath the truck now, and you'll see my drive shafts are painted black. I bought some Rust-Oleum and painted them with just a spray can, a rattle can. I used cardboard and tape to tape off all of the U-joints and the slip joints, and just wanted to get rid of the rust. So I did sand the rust down, and then I painted everything. Some people will say that that'll ruin your warranty because if your U-joint, well, not U-joints, if your slip joint starts to leak, they could blame the fact that I painted them. But I did a good job, and worst case, I will replace that on my own. So in reality, the flash rust on the drive shafts is not going to be a big deal. It's not the kind of rust that's going to go all the way in and eat the drive shaft apart, but I just really didn't like. I did that within the first couple weeks of owning my truck, and when I got it home, the day I bought it, it already had rust, and that just didn't sit well with me. So I used some Brillo pads and some sandpaper to get all the rust off, painted it, haven't thought about it since, just got under there right now, still looks pretty good. The other thing I did, and I couldn't show you because the skid plates are on right now, is I replaced the stock oil drain plug, which is about 3/4 inch circle. And when you take it out, the oil comes flying out. And it's, for me, every time I've done an oil change in my driveway, I've made a mess, even knowing it was going to come out as fast as it did. So I replaced that with a Ronin drain plug for the Ranger Raptor. And basically that allows you to actually control how much oil is coming out and how quickly. The only downside to it, from what I can figure out, is that it's not going to oil as fast. So some of the debris that might be sitting on the bottom isn't going to get flushed out nearly as quick. But I honestly don't think that's going to be a problem. And maybe like every other time I change the oil, when it's about halfway, I'll pull that entire thing out once I'm ready for it to let the oil really come out quick. But I honestly don't think that's going to be necessary. There are a lot of vehicles out there that they don't even have drain plugs. They use an extractor and they go in through the top, through the dipstick, and actually put a tube in there and suck all the oil out. And in that sense, you're also not getting all that debris at the bottom. You're just sucking oil out. So that's another reason you also have an oil filter. So change the oil filter as well, and you should be good. Just something to think about. I haven't changed my oil since I put it on. I waited till 20,000 miles to put it on. My next oil change, like I said when I was talking about the oil catch can, is going to be in a couple weeks, and I will do a video using the Ronin oil plug to show you how much easier it is. You don't even need a drain pan. You can put a 5/8 inner diameter tube right on the thing and turn it off and have it go straight into like a canister with a small lid on it. So I'm excited to have that. I'm glad I'm not going to be making huge messes in my driveway and coming out here with kitty litter afterwards and having my wife be mad at me. So while we're on the topic of maintenance, this isn't something to show you, but just to let you know, when I hit 20,000 miles, I changed a lot of fluids. I did the front and rear differentials. I did the transfer case. I changed out the windshield wipers. I changed the air oil filter. I also changed the engine air filter right before I actually put the cold air intake on it. But that's just something else to keep in mind. You're going to have to do all these different maintenance things, and if you do it at the dealership, it's going to cost you a whole lot more. Really, it's not all that difficult. You have both a drain plug and a fill plug on your front and rear differentials and your transfer case. So I did an entire video on that, 20,000 mile maintenance. Just the secret, or not the secret, but the thing to keep in mind is anytime you're going to drain your transfer case or your front or rear differential, always crack open the fill plug first. Because the last thing you want to do is open the drain plug, let all the oil out, and then find out that your top plug is seized or the socket is stripped out and you can't get it open. Now you have no way to put the fluid back in there. So like I said, I did front and rear differential, transfer case, windshield wipers, engine air filter. I did the oil and the oil filter, and then the cabin air filter. So I did all of that stuff. And of all of those things, I think the front and rear differentials probably didn't need to be done. They could have gone a lot longer. But to me, it was also a break-in period. Any metal that came out, I wanted to get rid of that. Your drain plug does have a magnet on it, so make sure when you take it out, you wipe that on a paper towel or something before you put it back in. The transfer case, recommended around 30,000. I'm glad I did it at 20. It did come out a little bit dirty, but it wasn't terrible. It could have definitely gone another 5 or 10,000 miles. And I do fully synthetic on everything, and I still buy all of my stuff through Ford. I buy the Motorcraft just to make sure it's in their system that I bought it, because I do this stuff myself so that they can't say I wasn't changing my oil. They can look and see when I bought it. And then I also go with full synthetic for the engine oil and change it every 5,000 miles. Their recommendation, I think, is every 10. That's just a little bit too much for me, especially with the twin turbocharged vehicle. Those turbochargers burn a little bit of oil. It's a lot harder on the oil. The oil has to work more and breaks down a little bit faster. It probably could go to 10,000 miles, but I plan to keep this truck long term. And if an oil change every 5,000 miles makes it last a little bit longer and reduces my maintenance costs down the road, I'm totally willing to do it. And it's fun to wrench on your truck a little bit every once in a while, changing the oil, things like that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Auto Start Stop Eliminator. I installed this within a month of getting my truck, just because I really didn't like the fact that I had to push the button every time I started the truck to disable it. In the past, before EPA made it a mandate, you could turn it off permanently in some of your settings. On my old like Ford Focus ST and my Ford Focus RS, it was able to be turned off permanently. EPA made it a law apparently that says it has to be enabled every time you start your vehicle. And I think actually in the last couple months they've done away with that. But our trucks are still to the point where every time you start your truck, it's going to be enabled. So I installed a piggyback thing off of one of the modules up in the front. It's on the passenger side, inside, actually around the side of the glove compartment. So you got to take the glove compartment out. Basically, you unplug the connection, you put this thing in between it, plug it all back together, and it remembers your last setting for the Auto Start Stop Eliminator. So if you had it enabled, next time you start your truck, it's going to be enabled. If you disable it and then you turn your truck off, turn it back on, it'll be disabled again. You don't have to push that button. And I installed this, like I said, the month after I got it, and I have not had to touch that button since then. and it's always been off. Even through the battery being disconnected for hours at a time while I'm installing different things, it still remembered the setting. It still has it disabled all the time, and I just haven't had to think about it twice. And I know a lot of people say it's not that hard, you just push the button. I thought so too. I used to be a pilot. I used to go through checklists every time I would start an aircraft, and you go through all these things and it does become second nature, but it never got into my mental checklist of checking mirrors, you know, doing everything when you're getting in the vehicle. And then I get to the first stoplight or the stop sign by my house and the engine would shut off. Or if I was going to Harris Teeter, I would get to the stoplight and it would turn off there. And it just, you know, $100 to buy this 4D Tech auto start stop Eliminator just completely negated it. Now my wife wants it in her Lincoln Aviator, so I'll probably be installing one there as well. But anyway, 4D Tech is where I got it. It does an awesome job. When I did it, there was no way to disable that in FORScan. Now that EPA has done away with that law, maybe there is, but I haven't seen it and I haven't been in to look for it. I don't think it's in the settings or anything. I know it was not when I put it in there, and I doubt Ford pushed out a way to permanently disable it after the fact when the EPA did away with their law. Final two things I want to talk about in this video with regards to performance and mechanical upgrades, and I did talk about this during the exterior mods that I did, but these Method 702 or 703 wheels, it's more of a look thing because it did change the offset. It stuck them out a little bit more by 20 more millimeters, which is about an inch. But the bigger difference on the performance side is that these wheels are like 8 pounds or 7 pounds per wheel lighter than the beadlock capable wheels that I had on here before. And like I said, they poke out a little bit more, so now they're perfectly flush with the fenders and they just look better. I did put the exact same BF Goodwrench KO3s right back on here with my TPMS. I weighed the beadlock capables before and then I weighed these after, and like I said, all the way around the truck, I saved a little over 25 pounds, which is a huge difference when you're talking unsprung rotational mass. You accelerate faster, you corner a little bit better. It takes the shock of, you know, bouncing around a little bit better. It's not huge, but 20 pounds is 20 pounds. Granted, I do have so much other crap on here, but none of this is unsprung rotational mass. Wheels, tires, suspension, stuff like that, that is unsprung, and then wheels and tires themselves are rotational. So that's all I'm saying about that. Wheels do make a difference. I think the perfect offset for the stock setup without a lift and without putting bigger fenders is between 35 and 25, plus 35 and plus 25, because basically offset, when you have a wheel, and we'll just use round numbers, that's 100 millimeters. If it was 100 millimeters, and I'm using millimeters because all the offsets are done in millimeters, 0 would be right in the middle. If you do a positive offset, you're actually putting where the wheel meets up with the hub further outside, to the outside of the wheel, which means the whole wheel is tucked inside more. So we had plus 55 when we got our vehicles, which means it was 55 millimeters outside the center of the wheel, which means the whole wheel was sucked in 55 millimeters. This is 35, so it brought it out about 20 millimeters more. 0, and the wheel would be sticking out maybe an inch or two past the fender, which some people like the look of that. I personally don't. And I don't like flinging rocks at the cars behind me when I get off a trail and get back on the freeway. So that's it. I'm done talking about the wheels. If you're looking for them, just know about 35-25 is a good offset. There are so many pictures of different people with different wheels on their trucks on the Ranger 6G website, or the forum, ranger6g.com, and all of the different Facebook pages. So look there, you can see a ton. You can see mine are plus 35, and I think they look great. The Method 703 is a great wheel. It's light, but there's so many different ones out there. Black Rhino makes some cool stuff, and just there's so many wheel brands. I don't even know them all. Back when I was driving BMWs and the Focus RS and stuff, the BBS were the cool wheels out there. But in the off-road world, it's new to me. I've had some Tacomas, but I just had like Dick Sepics and nothing special on those. So anyway, moving on. The last thing I did mechanically to my truck, and this was a requirement for me because I'm putting all this stuff over the bed, was the load box reinforcement brackets. So when Ford came out with the 6th gen Ranger, I guess they didn't build the bed strong enough for stuff up on top of the bed rails. And the weak point was the 90-degree angle from where it meets the frame rail and comes up on your, what do they call this, the side of the bed? I mean, your bed rails, whatever it is. Anyway, if you had a bunch of weight up here and you're out off-roading and it's moving around, it didn't have the structural fortitude to maintain all that, and you could actually going over a bunch of bumps, all this weight could actually bend your entire bed over those spots, and then you would get out and your bed would be flopped to the side or something. So basically on 2024 Ranger Raptors, and all Rangers actually, 2024 Rangers built before October of 24 did not have the load box reinforcements. Since then, they have started installing them, or they're building them with it already reinforced. But 2025 shouldn't have to worry about it, and a 2024 built after October of 24 shouldn't have to worry about it. But basically, it's just a big steel L bracket that you got to take some stuff off. You got to take this part of your fender off. You got to take the, well, you don't have to take the wheel out, but you should take the wheel out. You got to remove the entire liner to get in there, and then you can actually you cut a piece of metal, you stick that bracket in there, you bolt it all in, and that gives you the ability to put all this weight up on top of the bed rails. If you have one of these trucks from before October of 24 and you don't plan on putting anything above the bed, you don't have anything to worry about. The bed itself can still handle all the weight you can put in it, up to the max amount of 1,000 pounds or whatever they say this truck can handle. The concern is weight up on the top when you're off-road, and it's putting all this stress when you're rocking back and forth and you have a big tent up here and 50 pounds worth of water in your shower and things like that. It's just a lot of extra stress. So just something to consider. It's not really an issue anymore, but if you buy a used one, get under there and look. You can see if it's there or not, and you can watch my video on how I installed it. You can save yourself some money by doing it yourself if you want to take, an hour or 2 or 3 to do it on your own versus paying $200+ to the dealership. What I have planned for the future, and I have all the parts for it, and I'm going to be working on it this weekend, is a dual battery system. So basically, I'm going to be putting a secondary battery in the bed of my truck that gets charged from the main battery and alternator when the vehicle's on, but anything I draw from that can't draw from the main battery. So if I had fans or a refrigerator or some lights hooked up to that and it goes dead, it's completely separated from the main battery unless it's on and charging. So it just kind of gives you that peace of mind where if you're out camping and you're using power and you do run it down, you're still going to be able to start your truck and get out of there. And I actually bought a 100 amp hour lithium battery that I'm going to have back there. That's kind of my starter kit. I might end up going up to like a 300 eventually if it turns out I need it, but I think that's going to be enough for me. Another thing I'm thinking about doing is changing out the way I have my gear stored in the bed. I've been looking again at the single drawer decked system. And in the past, in my Jeep Gladiator, I had the dual drawer, and it was just so much wasted space. You couldn't really fit that much stuff back there. So I think the single drawer is a whole lot better. I do like the way it looks. I like that it's completely watertight, whereas my tonneau cover leaks like a sieve, and I have to have everything in containers anyway. So I would like to do that. The only concern is mounting the rack to the bed of the truck. Right now I have it set up in the rails, and Yakima doesn't recommend their bed rail clamps on a Ford Ranger because we have this piece of plastic over it. So I got to do a little more research on that, but it's definitely something I can do. I just got to know a little bit more about it. Another thing I want to do is an undercarriage camera system, kind of looking both forward and back on a screen that I can have inside my vehicle. I sort of had that set up on one of my rear view, or not my dash cams that replaced the rear view mirror, but I didn't keep that long term because that thing was getting so hot, I thought it was going to start a fire. It's been a while. I've had this truck for 1.5 years and I still haven't tinted the front windows. So that's definitely on the list. And then maybe just a UV tint on the windshield just to keep everything protected a little bit more. No actual tint so I don't get pulled over, but just to protect everything on the inside. I still don't have a spray and bed liner. I will probably do that eventually, but it's not really high on my list. The seat upholstery, it's not terrible in this truck, but my driver's seat is a little bit wavy. It's been that way since day one. And I tried seat covers and I just didn't like the way they look. So I think eventually I'm gonna get cat skins where they take the existing upholstery off and put brand new upholstery on there. It's a little bit expensive, but it looks awesome and they do a really good job. It fits really tight. It's actually thicker, more supple, so it'll be good. And then the last thing on my list, but probably one of the next things I'm going to do after the dual battery, is take these running boards off and actually put some rock sliders, and then also go ahead and replace or add skid plates all the way down back. So right now, skid plates on these trucks cover your, like you got the bash plate in the front that protects everything up front. Then you have a skid plate coming back to protect your engine oil pan, your front differential. You have one in the right around here that does your transfer case, but your transmission is completely exposed. So I just wanted to add a little bit more undercarriage protection for when I'm out on the trails. I have hit some rocks up to this point, bent a couple little things and just hit them back out with a hammer, but there's definitely some concern when I'm out on the trails, especially with the plastic transmission oil pan and the plastic engine oil pan. Granted, the engine does have a skid plate already. So anyway, those are what's coming up next. Hopefully by the end of this weekend, I will have my dual battery system set up and videoed, and I can start working on that video in case anybody else is curious about it. Like I said at the beginning, I did just install these max speeding rod lights, but the wiring harness they came with, it has a relay, but if you hook that straight up to your battery without going through one of your auxiliary switches and use their auxiliary switch, your battery will be drained within about a week and a half if you never drive it and have the alternator charging it, because they were wired so that the relay is always open, or relay is always closed, the circuit is closed. And to do that, there's a little magnet. Relays, when you switch on a relay, it actually closes the circuit, and closing that circuit draws about 0.18 amps, 12 volts. And if you were to do that over 5 days, you're going to run about 40 amp hours. And that's what a standard battery in a vehicle is, 40 amp hours. It can crank several hundred amps, but that's cold cranking amps. Those aren't amp hours, very different things. Again, I'm not an electrician, but I do understand. I probably have an average to above average knowledge of electrical things in general. So I did have to cut that wiring harness apart. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to use it, but I absolutely love these lights because they have a couple different colors that you can have. And I don't really want that for, like, you know, throwing parties and, you know, blue lights and purple lights and stuff, but I like the idea of red lights when I'm camping so it doesn't ruin your night vision and stuff like that. I feel like I'm just rambling now, so I'm pretty much done here. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any specific questions, let me know. That's it, guys. I'll talk to you later. Cheers.
It's over!